Hello and welcome to FORTIFY and our presentation today on coaching. We are going to wait just a couple more minutes to allow some others to join us, and then we will get started. Welcome to all of you who have joined us. We're going to wait just a couple more moments to give everybody an opportunity to get online with us, and then we will start our presentation. So welcome. My name is Janine Mason. I'm the founder and executive director of the Fieldstone Leadership Network San Diego, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to FORTIFY. This is our webinar series that is presented in partnership with Fieldstone and the Nonprofit Institute at the University of San Diego. The purpose of FORTIFY is to strengthen the leadership, well-being, and sustainability of nonprofit leaders and organizations. And to do that, we have cultivated 10 webinars for nonprofit leaders and organizations throughout San Diego. And we offer 2 webinars each week. And the Friday offering is on personal and professional wellness and development. And so today we're very pleased to offer a session on coaching and being able to use coaching as you are leading yourself and your teams through this crisis of COVID-19. At Fieldstone, we offer a peer coaching program. We've been doing that for about 26 years now. And through that time, I've seen the power of not only having a coaching relationship and someone that you can talk with, but also by using those skills of a coach to manage and lead teams. So I'm very, very pleased and excited that we're able to offer this to you today. A couple of things just to help you to make the most of this experience. If you are having any technical difficulties whatsoever, please contact Cynthia Fernandez. You have her email there, or you may also use the chat box and connect with Cynthia that way. For your information, everyone is muted. And if you have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. So I'll be keeping track of those, so don't worry about those getting lost, but just add them to that area. If you have resources that you would like to share with our community and our gathering here today, please add those to chat, or if you have any other comments, please add them also to the chat feature. We are going to stay online for about 10 minutes after the webinar has been completed for some extended time to answer questions that you might have of Linda. We are recording this presentation, and it will be available along with any of the resources that we gather on both of our websites. And we know that we have people here today from both the Nonprofit Institute and USC and the Fieldstone Leadership Network San Diego. And if you're new to either of our programs, welcome. We'd love to have you be more involved with us, and there is more information on both of our websites if you're interested in participating further with us. As I mentioned, we will do a 10-minute after-hour conversation for any questions that you might have. So don't panic if you feel like your question is not being answered. We'll make sure that everyone gets addressed before we finalize today. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Lynn Corbett, who is representing the University of San Diego and the Nonprofit Institute. He serves as the Director of Governance and Community Programs, and he's currently a PhD candidate in the School of Leadership and Education Sciences. Lynn?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. As Janine mentioned, this is an incredible partnership that we are very excited about. For those of you who do not know, we have been sending out surveys just to get a pulse on how the community is reacting to this pandemic and how it is impacting our organizations. We'll be compiling and releasing more data in the coming weeks. But right now, I'd like to just show you what at least the initial data is telling us, that 76% of the nonprofit organizations are reevaluating their fundraising strategies. 61% of them are seeking opportunities for financial scenario planning. Their board of directors have contacted saying that they need some guidance, and 40% said they coaching sessions in coping with emotional stress of pandemic. And then one other one I want to highlight is the biggest one for us, just because we are researchers and pretty big into making sure the data is telling the story. 72% have asked for sharing real-time data about the nonprofit needs with funders because it's consistently changing. And we have been, over the past week, meeting with some of the government officials, at least sharing this data to make sure that where they understand that the decisions they make impact communities more so than they know, and sometimes impacting communities that may not be, often at times their data is being captured. So we spread this far and wide to make sure that we're getting the most accurate data. And we also are doing what we do best, which is convening stakeholders, providing them information, providing them resources, and giving them additional tools for their toolbox. So with 40% of the people asking this, we decided to make sure that coaching was a strong component to this. So we thank you for your attendance today. And I'd like to, at this time, introduce our speaker, who will be today. And as Jeannie mentioned, these will be every Tuesday and Friday, with our next one coming up on Tuesday, which we'll share a little bit more about as we close out. So Linda is a clinical psychologist who has turned executive leadership coach. She's certified with ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation, which is the premier organization that certifies coaches. She has 25 years of experience in coaching individual, groups, and teams at various levels. She's also the lead instructor in the Leadership Coaching Certificate Program at USD. So please join me in welcoming Linda to the program. And Linda, we will, as you share your screen, we'd love for you to, we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Perfect. All right, just checking in that my screen is being shared now.
Yes, but you're going to want to swap it because I think it's view options, because we can see your the part that everyone's seeing. So click a view options there. Let's see. No.
Oh gosh, let's just have a moment. It says I'm screen. Should I stop share for a moment? And
we just saw your presenter notes. We weren't able to see the full screen. So if you can show us again, maybe it'll come up as your presenter notes, not your presenter notes, but your full screen.
All right, I think what I'm going to do then is do something different here.
Yeah, sometimes there's a button that says swap views.
This was all working beautifully, of course, when we were in setup. All right, let's try now. And is that working?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay.
All right, excellent. Hi, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here with you today. And thank you for that introduction, Lynn, and my apologies for the little technical glitch. Before COVID-19, we were already living in a fast-paced, stressful, fast-changing world, signified by a lot of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, the so-called VUCA world. The difference that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought into our lives is that every human being on the planet is coping with enormous uncertainty and anxiety at the same time. We're dealing with an enormous amount of loss. The tragic loss of life, but also the loss of life as we knew it. We no longer can keep the same schedules, really connect face-to-face with people. We're unable to participate in the activities that energize us and allow us to de-stress. And we've also lost our sense of safety. And it's understandable that under these circumstances, many of us are struggling. Many people are struggling emotionally. And this emotional distress is affecting productivity and motivation at work. So today, my aim is to share with you the essential elements of coaching so that you can support and encourage your colleagues at work, whether they be on your team, whether they are somebody who reports to you, or even perhaps if it's somebody that you report to. Importantly, the kind of coaching that I'm going to be introducing you to is what's known most commonly as performance coaching or situational coaching. So what is coaching really? I'd like to start with what coaching is not. It's not mentoring, which has a strong component of giving advice based on years of experience and wisdom gained. It's not consulting in the sense of gathering data, analyzing it and making recommendations. It's not about therapy or counseling, which are for much more severe psychological issues and require referral to appropriate professionals. And it's not training, where a trainer sets themselves up as an expert in a particular area and has a set curriculum. The ICF defines coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. And the key thing here is the partnering, as well as that it is an effort to close the gap between a person's potential and where they are now. What lies at the very heart of coaching is the relationship between the coach and the person being coached. And we call this the working alliance, which is based on trust, mutual respect, and safety. So confidentiality is a really core element of any coaching relationship. An effective working alliance contains empathy, and that is the ability to really walk in the shoes of another, note their emotional state, and communicate a willingness to stay in that space with them, rather than dismiss it or judge it. Which takes me to non-judgment, which is an essential element of the working alliance. It's essential when coaching to suspend judgment and to really hold the client with positive regard, no matter what they're struggling with. The other essential element is presence, which is all about being fully present in the moment with the person that you're coaching, and also being able to be flexible and adjust to their changing needs or the changing elements of the conversation. And finally, an essential element of the working alliance is a firm belief that the person that you are coaching is whole, that they are resourceful, that they have within them the strengths and the ability to resolve their issue or issues with your support. Given that we're all dealing with so much loss on a daily basis, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief can be really useful in giving you an insight into what your co-workers and yourself might be experiencing right now. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work was originally around death and dying, but it was subsequently and has and continues to be used in really understanding any adaptation or adjustment to loss. The stages, as you can see up on the slide, are denial, bargaining, anger, depression, and I've added anxiety, and eventually acceptance. So in the world of COVID-19, denial might be everybody's making such a big fuss. This is similar to the flu. Anger might be, they've taken away my ability to do my favorite activity. The bargaining might be, well, if I social distance for 2 weeks and wear a mask and do all careful things, everything will be all right, won't it? The depression and anxiety perhaps speak for themselves, but the depression would be feelings of helplessness or hopelessness, a sense of, I just don't think I can keep on doing this. And the anxiety may be experienced as being hyper alert, not being able to sit still or calm down, as well as active worries about what the future might hold. And what acceptance might look like in a situation like this would be a realization that this is the new normal for now, it will end, and I'm going to do what I can to ensure that I'm as productive as I can be. So what I'd like to do now is to ask Cynthia to please launch a poll. And in terms of getting to know yourself and being able to be empathic with the people that you coach, I'd like you to take a moment, it's anonymous, and check at which stage you might be in today. And please know that the stages that we are in vary from day to day, and in fact might even vary through a day, so that you start out feeling okay, but land up in the middle of the day feeling depressed, and at the end of the day really frustrated or angry. So I'll just give everybody a moment longer to complete the poll. All right, and let's see. People are still voting. And the important thing here is to know that all of this is all right. Any emotional response in the moment on any given day is, under these circumstances, to be expected. And it is important to normalize it, not just for yourself, but also for people that you might coach in your organization, so that they don't have a sense of being judged or a sense of failing in some way. All right. So Cynthia, if you could go ahead and end the poll and launch it so that we can just give our participants a view. So it's interesting that our group today, the greater majority, so 47%, are at a level of acceptance today, but there are certainly people feeling anxious and depressed, and that's real. What doesn't help in situations like this is denying feeling or suppressing it, because it's going to show up in one way or another. But being with an emotion, acknowledging it, and knowing that it is a phase and that it too shall pass with time can be very encouraging, not just for ourselves, but for people that you might be coaching. Cynthia, thank you. If you can stop sharing. So how do we empower the people that we are coaching? Well, we empower them by assisting them to find solutions, and we do this through asking questions. And there is an art to asking questions, and most of us have fallen into our own habitual way of asking questions. So I'd like to share with you the conditions that allow for effective coaching questions to arise. The first is presence, and that is being in a position where you're not distracted internally by what's going on for you, and you're not distracted by what's going on in the external environment. The reality for all of us is that there are many internal and external distractions going on at any one time. In the chat box, if you could just list some of the internal or external distractions that might prevent you from being fully present with somebody who may need your support. And Cynthia, if you could perhaps share those with me as they come in, or share them with us, I should say.
Yes.
So what is it that might stop you from being able to really be fully present?
Some say homeschooling kids, financial worries,
Right.
Zoom burnout, anxiety, personal anxiety, again, caring for family, meeting deadlines, other virtual distractions, cell phones, having multiple new roles, being around their partner 24/7, meeting goals, anxiety with meeting goals and expectations.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for sharing those, because the reality is that it takes intention, mindful intention, to be fully present. And knowing that we have these multiple internal and external distractions, it's important, if you're coaching somebody, to do what you can to minimize those. Another important condition is to enter the conversation with a beginner's mind. And what I mean by that is deep curiosity, the kind of curiosity that children have, where there is not the expectation, they don't have the expectation of knowing the answer or being the expert. They love to ask questions, and actually research shows ask thousands of questions a day. Whereas as we grow older, we as adults tend to not ask nearly as many questions because of a self-imposed feeling that we should know. So having this open, curious beginner's mind is very helpful. The tone that we use when we're asking our questions is as important as the content, because we communicate more in terms of how we are feeling through the tone than we do through the actual words. So being mindful, being self-aware about the way that we're asking our questions. Timing is important, especially under these conditions, where the kind of question that you ask and when you ask it should pay attention to the emotional state of the person that you're interacting with. And you might want to be gentle with question asking to begin with, until you get a sense of what the person you're coaching can tolerate, given their current stress levels. And finally, silence is really important when you've asked a question, to allow the question to do its work. If you rush in after you've asked a question to simply ask another question, then you've lost the golden opportunity of that question generating insight for the person that you're coaching. So I have a question for you. Let's do a poll, Cynthia. And this has to do with, what do you prefer? Do you prefer a situation where you are questioned about what you did wrong, where the focus is on problems and not on solutions, but it's focusing on those gaps and what's wrong, as well as on what you should do? The alternative is that you're able to engage in a conversation with someone who considers your strengths and who asks you to contemplate your vision for how you may solve what you're dealing with. So give a moment. I'm not sure, Cynthia, whether you've launched the poll. There we go. So please take a look at that poll and answer it with a sense of, when do you feel most engaged, energized, willing to participate? We'll just take a moment while people are filling these out. All right. Well, already I can see that, and you can publish once the poll is complete and share the results. Thanks, Cynthia. But, you know, over 95% of us know that we are more engaged and feel better with a strengths focus. And what's interesting is that Boyatsi, Smith, and Van Oosten, who have done science-based research over 35 years, when they've had a look at their research, it's clear that a focus on problems creates activity in the brain that they've called negative emotion attractors, and that this shuts people down. It shuts learning down. People are not open to listening or engaging. Whereas a strength-based approach that incorporates positive feedback, use of strengths, as well as vision for the future, is an approach that generates a response in the parasympathetic nervous system that generates positive emotion attractors. And so what happens when we use this approach when coaching is that clients are able to be more open, to relax, to be willing to engage in problem solving, but also their emotions change. And they are able to feel excited, to see possibilities, to feel energized, and to have a sense of hope. So this is really important under the current circumstances, and it's worth considering in terms of the questions that we ask. For those of you who are interested in understanding the power of this, their book, Helping People Change, is highly recommended. So let's take a look at the question traps that we all fall into. And as I'm going through them, I want you to consider which ones might pertain to you. So just think about that as I go through them. The first is closed questions, where we ask a question in such a way that really the person can only answer yes or no. For example, did you speak to your boss? What that does is it shuts down the flow of the conversation, not very creative. Solution-focused questions are very disempowering because they are a question that has the solution within them. So, for example, have you considered speaking to your direct report, the one with whom you're having the issue? Once again, that's disempowering. The perfect question hampers us in a coaching relationship because it creates awkward silences while we're internally trying to frame the perfect question. And the bottom line here is that simple and short is always best. There is no such thing as a perfect question. Rambling questions are very disorienting for clients. These are long questions and questions within questions where inevitably the person you're coaching will need to stop you and ask you to repeat yourself. So I go back to the mantra of short and simple is best. Interpretive questions are those sorts of questions where we are projecting our perception of a situation onto our client. And it can feel invasive to the client, but also depending on power differentials, if there are any in terms of status differences, they may feel that they need to agree with you. So a person who says, I just didn't feel like I could go to the team meeting this morning. If, as a coach, one says, when did you become intimidated by team meetings? That is us putting our interpretation of their saying, I just couldn't go. Whereas an appropriate question would be more along the lines of, what was it that left you feeling that you couldn't attend the meeting today? Rhetorical questions always come across as judging. So the one that comes to mind for me right now is one like, you didn't do that, did you? Or what were you thinking? So it's really a judgment disguised as a question, and it shuts people down. Leading questions contain the answer within them. They're very similar to solution-focused questions, and they're pretty subtle. Important to be on the lookout for how you might lead a person to the right, to what you perceive to be the right answer or the right action. Interrupting when the person you're coaching is speaking. Sometimes interrupting is necessary, and I'll speak to that. But if you keep on and on and on interrupting with your questions, then what happens there is that you're not holding the working alliance at the center of your work. It's becoming about you, not about them. Neglecting to interrupt with a question can be problematic under certain circumstances. And the circumstance that I'm thinking about is when the person we're coaching is going round and round and round in circles, or perhaps sharing so much detail that you're losing your way. It's perfectly appropriate to ask, may I interrupt you for a moment? The person you're coaching will always say yes. I've certainly, in over 25 years, have never had someone say no. And then to follow it with something like, I'm a little confused here. Could you clarify this for me? So really important to know when interrupting is important. And finally, why questions are traps that we don't want to fall into, because they set up a stress response inside the person that we're working with, where they feel under a lot of pressure to justify themselves.
Linda?
Yes.
We do have a comment in the chat box asking if you could unpack interpretive questions and how to best avoid interpretations. Their comment was that we all carry bias, and it's often difficult to not bring my assumptions into a question or discussion. Would you like to address that now, or would you like to wait?
Yes, sure. No, I can address that now by saying that when it comes to interpretation, the only way to the question asker's point, because we have our own biases and because we're immersed in our own world, we are at risk in adding interpretations into our questions. And of course, it's unavoidable that as a coach, each of us is unique and we will each be bringing who we are, our past, our experiences, our background into the space. That's unavoidable. What we can do is build our self-awareness, build our ability to be fully present with another person, so that when we are about to ask a question, we're able to notice, and it can happen in a split second with practice, we're able in that moment to notice, where is this question coming from? Is this my need to sound clever? Is it my need to help or save the person that I'm coaching, the so-called rescuer syndrome or savior syndrome? So I think that at this point, my answer to that question is that self-awareness helps, being very aware of holding the person we are coaching at the center of our work, so that our question comes from a place of curiosity, not from a place of assumption. And if you catch yourself making an interpretive question, know that you can always correct yourself and say, I'd like to reframe that. So, for example, in a situation where one might have said, what made you feel intimidated about team meetings? Once I catch myself and notice that interpretation, I could say, let me reframe that, because perhaps you weren't feeling intimidated. There may be many reasons why you didn't attend that meeting. Would you be willing to share what those are? So I think at this point in time, I'm going to leave that particular question. And if there are follow-on questions, I'm very happy to field those at the end. We've been through rhetorical and leading questions, and we were at why questions. Okay, great. So at this point, Cynthia, if you could launch the poll about questions, and this is a poll that is going to be asking you about which of these question traps you know that you fall into, and you can pick as many as you know that you fall into. In all honesty, you know, most of us are using at least 3, if not 4 of these on a fairly regular basis in our relationships, even if they're not coaching relationships. So this skill of being able to ask an effective question is one that you can use in all of your relationships, not just in coaching. All right, let's see what's coming up. We have a lot of people with solution-focused questions, which is understandable, because I think that we have an overriding need to solve or fix for others. So that certainly came in as the highest. If you can publish that for us, Cynthia, thank you. And you can see that actually most of them have been checked by our participants today, which is to be expected. So it's helpful to know what your default tendencies may be and to start paying attention. And I want to help you with that in terms of the self-correction by sharing with you, in summary, what effective questions look like. They're short and open-ended, beginning with what or how. They provoke thinking and discovery in the person that you're coaching. They contain the right amount of challenge, being sensitive and empathic to where the person is at. And they allow the person that you're coaching to really think about what's going on for them. And this promotes new insights and learning for them. But if you're totally new to a coaching modality, the easiest way to think about this is allow them to be short, open-ended, starting with what and how, and to be really curious. That's a very good starting place. Of course, it doesn't help much if we ask a really effective question, but then we don't listen to the response from the person that we're coaching. Listening skills are essential when in a coaching relationship, and all of us have heard about active listening. In the coaching world, we speak about levels of listening, and there are 3 distinct levels that were identified in Coactive Coaching Skills, a book that is worth reading if you're interested in pursuing this. Level 1 is that internal listening where you're filled with distraction, inner distraction. You're not present, you're busy formulating what it is that you want to say or the question that you want to ask. Level 2 is focused listening. And this is where we focus on what the client says. We're able to clarify, summarize, paraphrase, reflect back what we're hearing and what we're sensing. And that's active listening as we know it. And certainly level 2 listening is good enough for a coaching relationship. But for a truly deep connection with the person that you're coaching, global listening, which is the 3rd level, is really where you want to be. And this is listening beneath what the person is saying to the space underneath the words or even between them. So it's attuning to the nonverbals. It's attuning to the overriding mood or energy in the space between you. And you'll notice that the connection between you deepens and is much stronger if you're coming from a level 3 global listening place. So I'd like to invite you to just on your own consider which level of listening is your default level of listening when you're in conversation with others in general. And please know that global listening develops with practice. So if you're committed to coaching someone and being the best possible coach for them, working on practicing listening beneath what a person is saying. If you practice that over and over, it eventually becomes just what you do. I want to move now to a model or framework that you can use when you're in a coaching relationship, when you're using your questions and your listening skills. And this is the GROW model, introduced first by Landsberg and then by Whitmore, and published by Whitmore. And this GROW model is an acronym for goal, reality, options, and will. This framework is really, really helpful for in the moment or supportive coaching, performance coaching, and starting with the goal. That's where you get a sense of where the person is at. And although this image says it's a question of what do you want, I think that in these times and even more generally, it's really helpful to ask a person, what do you need right now? And to get a sense first of where they're at, then to move to, well, what do you want? What do you see as a better situation for yourself? This relates to the engaging of the positive emotional attractors that I spoke of earlier. And there is a visioning and a hopefulness in setting up what the goal might be. Certainly, we all know about setting SMART goals, and that's fine. If you're wanting to make the goal very specific for the person that you're coaching with, it's always a really good idea to do it. And using the SMART acronym in terms of it being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely is super helpful. Reality is looking at the current reality and looking at it through the lens of the strengths and resources that the person already has within them. The options section is the really creative part of the conversation, and this is where you're inviting the person you're coaching to share what they could do. And it's a design space, if you like, where it's really helpful for them to think outside of the box and not be limited for the moment by the current reality, but to generate possible solutions and then to look at them with a more critical, reflective eye as to what is absolutely not possible, narrow it down to what is possible that they could do. And then finally, the W in the GROW acronym, which relates to will or work, is what is the work that they are willing to commit to do in order to move towards their desired goal. And this is part of the SMART goal setting, which is to allow them to get very specific and also to have a time frame involved in that. It's so important as a coach to be an accountability partner, to check in with the person that we're coaching, to see how they're doing, to see what barriers they may have encountered, and to offer support by way of asking what it is that might be helpful for them, as opposed to just offering a solution. And then really importantly, it's essential when we're coaching people to celebrate the wins with them. Not just achieving the goal, but any small step towards achieving it. It's always useful to start small so that people feel that success and the energy and motivation that comes from that. So start small, celebrate every small win with your clients along the way. In closing, and before we move to questions, I want to say that I firmly believe that the opportunity that the COVID-19 pandemic presents us is to be able to engage in our shared humanity. We are all in this together. We are all vulnerable in this together. And from this place of empathy, and now having a basic model to work with, knowing what's at the heart of a coaching alliance in terms of empathy, presence, unconditional positive regard, non-judgment, knowing how to ask better questions and to really listen, you now have the essential basic skills to go out and coach and support those who need it. So thank you, everybody. I'd like to now open it up for any questions.
Great, thank you, Linda. That was fabulous. One question to start us off is, can you speak to group coaching So if somebody has a team of people that they wanted to use the information that you've just shared in a group setting, would you have any advice that might be different than one-on-one?
My advice about coaching in a group setting is that if you've never coached before, group coaching is extremely challenging. And so I would advise those of you who are brand new to coaching to start with one-on-one before you transfer those skills into group coaching. There is a distinction between group coaching and team coaching, because group coaching is the coaching of an individual within a group space. And there may well be common themes or a common reason that has brought the people together. And then one would focus one's attention on each individual in turn, coaching them and allowing other people in the group to coach them. A team is very much defined by having a shared purpose as well as shared responsibility. And when you're coaching a team, you're coaching the team as an entity. So the shift is really different. And it is a complex coaching field, the field of team coaching. It's a wonderful skill to learn and develop. It's certainly, the skills inherent in that are so complex that it's not something that I can share in answer to the question, other than to say team and group coaching is possible. The starting place is getting those basic skills in place for one-on-one coaching first, and then moving on. And a resource that I can share with you for those of you who are wanting to enter into the group and team coaching space is a book called From One to Many. And it's written by Jennifer Britton, Britton.
Great. So we have one other question. Do you have suggestions to adapt global listening when you can't tap into verbal messaging to providing support via phone, chat, or web?
Would you repeat the question again so that I can pick up the nuances?
Sure. Do you have suggestions to adapt global listening when you can't tap into verbal messaging? I'm sorry. When you can't tap into body messaging to provide support via the phone, chat, or web.
Okay, great. So I'm assuming that this question relates to when one doesn't have a visual of the person that you're communicating with and whom you're coaching. And that does happen. Sometimes it happens inadvertently. I've had it happen to me where a client of mine's camera was not working. There was a problem with it. So she could see me, but I couldn't see her. So it can happen unexpectedly, or you know it's going to happen if you're having a telephone conversation, or perhaps you're coaching someone through chat. My advice would be, when you're hearing a live voice, either through the phone or through video conferencing, my suggestion is to, once again, with intention, focus really intently on what the other person is saying. The interesting thing about the human brain is that when a particular stimulus is not there, our other senses rise to the occasion. So without the visual, your sense of hearing will be activated to a higher level, or rather your sense of listening will be activated. And you can pay attention to things like the tone of voice. Are you hearing edginess or grumpiness? or fear or hesitation. So you can tell a lot through the way a person is speaking, particularly through their vocal tone, the speed at which a person is speaking, especially if it is remarkably exaggerated, will tell you a lot as well. So someone who's talking very quickly might be anxious, they might be running out of time. So the important thing that we do as coaches is that we offer an observation. For example, I notice that you're speaking really quickly right now, which makes it hard for me to track you. And I'm wondering what that's about. So here's an opportunity where we could interpret, which we wouldn't want to do. We might say, you're speaking really quickly and I'm wondering what's making you anxious. All right, that's the interpretation. Whereas not interpreting is I'm noticing the fast speaking and I'm wondering what's going on for you. So we've spoken about tone and speed, volume. Notice the volume. Is a person getting louder? Are they getting increasingly softer? And inquire into what you notice. Notice the pauses. A long pause can mean many things. So inquire into it by noticing it and then asking that question of, what's happening for you right now in the silence? So that certainly applies to when you can hear a person. I don't know that we can apply real global listening when we're just reading text. We can sense tone, but I've certainly experienced, I'm sure many of you have experienced, misunderstanding through email or texting or chat boxes, because it's hard to get a sense of the tone and where the person's really coming from. So my sense would be to suggest to you that if you're not sure what is meant by a message that is typed, is to ask for clarification. And I think that that's certainly the best way to go about that, is don't assume, ask for clarification. And that should be helpful.
Great, thank you. One other question, do you have any recommendations on coaching someone who seems stuck in the stages of grief and is having trouble seeing a hopeful vision for the future?
Yes, I think that the most important thing to do there is to work on your ability to not only acknowledge where they are right now, but to support them in it by holding that space with them and not requiring them to be in a different space right now. So when we normalize difficult emotions for people, it reduces a lot of inattention. So just by normalizing it for them, you're doing a lot. The other thing that you could do, if you wanted to, is to share what you now know about the fact that we are all of us experiencing loss and we are all of us grieving on some level or another. And you could refer them to Kubler-Ross's 5 stages. Make sure that if you send them a document, it's where she's speaking about them in relation, or where someone is speaking about them in relation to loss and change. You could always send that to them and show them, very importantly, it's not a linear progression from denial through anger to bargaining to depression to acceptance. Share with them that it's, different times of different days, different weeks, we feel different, but that ultimately there is a place that we come to, and it takes time. And to reassure them that you're there to support them, knowing that it takes time.
Thank you, Linda. I want to be mindful of time, so we have hit our 1 o'clock time barrier. So for those of you that need to get onto your next calendar items, thank you so much for joining us. I do want to remind you that we have 2 more sessions that are coming up next week. We will meet on Tuesday with Lynn as our presenter. He's going to be talking about good governance. And on Friday, we will be hosting Zachary Green, who will be talking about personal and professional resiliency. So if you're interested in either of those webinars, please either go to the Fieldstone or Nonprofit Institute website. You'll find more information and the registration links there. We are going to stay online. We have one other question in our chat that we will address. And if you want to stay with us and you have other questions, feel free to do so. With that, I want to thank you, Linda. I thought you were marvelous. I was taking copious notes. You gave so many pearls of wisdom that I know will help me, and I hope and know it will help everyone that was here on the call with us today. So thank you so much for being part of the FORTIFY program and joining with Fieldstone and USD and making this offer available. Lynn, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, not at this time. I look forward to the additional questions, and I do want to, thank Linda for her presentation. And I'm a certified coach, and I was, again, writing down some stuff and learning some stuff as well. And I am continue to remain excited about this partnership and the ability to have it interactive where people can ask some questions that are relevant to them. And we will, again, look forward to the next few weeks of this. And if people continue to have suggestions or recommendations, please let us know. You can email us either one of our organizations. And then lastly, as we continue this work, we will continue to send out surveys, and we'll ask you to complete them and also to distribute them to people who you know may not normally participate and or provide information that needs to be captured. So thank you all very much for this opportunity.
Great. So Linda, one of the questions that was in the chat was any advice on coaching or motivating employees as they return back to work with the federal care package and UI benefits being higher than their hourly pay average as they step back into work again. The incentive of being paid more from that package is a hard one to overcome and motivate people.
I think that's a great question. And interestingly, it's not one that I've come across in the coaching work that I'm currently doing with my clients, but it's going to be a reality for many people. What comes to mind is the importance of having a real conversation up front as early as possible about the fact that COVID-19, the pandemic, the stay-at-home orders, these have all been extraordinary times. They are extraordinary times, and they will come to an end. So that what has been put in place to support people and small businesses during this to try and mitigate the negative impact for everybody. These things that have been put in place have been put there as a temporary measure for everybody. And that it's hard because we've had to, all of us, adjust to such major change. And now this is yet another adjustment that people are going to have to make. So I think acknowledging that this change and adjustment is difficult, that the discrepancy in pay is something that will feel difficult, perhaps will feel not as motivating. I think to acknowledge the reality of that. And then what I would do is invite people to connect with their purpose. with their purpose and passion for the work that they do, and to use the connection to that as an entryway into motivation.
Lovely. Okay, one last call. Does anyone have any other questions? We have a question that's not necessarily for Linda, but it is about the recording, and we will make the recording available. It will be both on the Nonprofit Institute's website as well as Fieldstone. So we're almost at 10 after. It looks like we've completed all the questions. So with that, I think that I might call us to a conclusion.
Thank you, Jenny.
I'd like to again thank you, Linda, for sharing your wisdom with us. It was a really meaningful hour, I believe. And for all of you who have joined us, thank you so very much. We look forward to seeing you next week, and we hope you have a restful weekend. Take care.